Good morning, Pelham Road. Whenever I wear this toboggan, someone will ask me, now, where did you get that? It says Yosemite on it, and it's got a little mountain range on it. And the place I got this is actually called the Landmark Project. It's local here in Greenville. You can go online, though, and order their stuff called the Landmark Project. All of the stuff they feature is from national parks, or most of it. Some of it's from state parks, too. But anyway, the Landmark Project. I get the feeling that we don't like history. Now, I do. I always have. The other day, I was watching an episode of the Andy Griffith show. It was the one about the mountain feud between two families whose children wanted to get married, Romeo and Juliet in the hills of North Carolina. There's a reason people like me and plenty of others like to watch older shows. It's called nostalgia. Now, let's not get nostalgia and history confused. Nostalgia is homesickness. If I'm nostalgic, I'm thinking about the way things used to be. It's remembering the past. But peculiarly enough, it's always a selected past. Now, history is different. History is to remember the good and the bad and the ugly, all of it. And that's why I get the feeling we don't like history. When people mention nostalgically the good old days, sometimes it's about their childhood, I imagine. Carefree, without responsibility, those are the good days to remember. Yet most of the time, the good old days are about a time when we thought times were simpler. Times weren't simpler. We just thought they were simpler because they were simpler for us. I mean, we thought that crime could be controlled with a warm smile and no gun. We thought women wanted to be tied to a house, that they wanted to be a housewife. We thought that. We thought Bill and Claire had a happy marriage. The trouble is that nostalgia, us being homesick, is that we are sadly homesick for a day that never was. A day that never was. You do know that Barney Fife was as much of a playboy as Burt Reynolds, right? It was all pretend. For most people, the good old days were only good for you. And maybe only good for you in your memory. African Americans have no interest in all in going back to what some people call the good old days of the 60s. Those weren't good days for them. Why would they want to go back to those days? They remember the history of Selma, which the anniversary is coming up this weekend. They remember being ushered into schools by National Guard troops. They remember church bombings. I mean, disabled people don't want to go back to before 1989, before we passed laws designating parking places reserved for the handicapped and bathrooms designed with their needs in mind. They don't want to go back. Those aren't good old days. 1977 is not a good old day for a person who was in a wheelchair. Now, nostalgia is a privilege that most can't afford, and history is a lesson we can't afford to forget. We've got to remember. And yes, remembering history is the good and the bad. There was a day when we did not think a second thought about how handicapped people would use a bathroom at a Walmart. We don't want to go back to those days. So the next time you're thinking about, I wish we could just go back to the good old days, Think of what it was like for people other than yourself. And remember the words of Billy Joel. The good old days weren't always good. And tomorrow ain't as bad as it seems. Have a great day.